Every once in a while, we do an episode where we're just responding to the needs and questions and requests of our listeners. This is one of those episodes. Many of you have asked us to do an episode about recovery kind of in the middle, somewhere between the extremes of non-treatment, homelessness, incarceration, and the other extreme of accomplishing so many of the things that our loved ones dreamed about when they were younger. There is such a thing as recovery in the middle of all that, and it has a lot to do with negative symptoms. On this episode, we talk about that, and we also talk about President Trump's executive order on homelessness. Welcome to our podcast, Schizophrenia, Three Moms in the Trenches. From the place where schizophrenia and real life collide. East Coast, West Coast, Middle America. With Miriam Feldman, Mindy Greiling, and Randye K. We are three moms. We each have a son with schizophrenia. We've each written books about it, and we are nearing the end of season 5 of this podcast, which, according to you listeners who have either met us, written to us, gone on our Facebook page, we all hope from the bottom of our hearts that we're being of some help. And so this is episode 122. We're going to do another one in 2 days because we have to postpone things. Anyway, as we approach the end of season 5, we just thought we would talk about something that you have written to us to ask about. And on this, as moms, we are experts. So we're just gonna talk about it ourselves. But before we do that, I'm here obviously with Mindy Greiling and Mimi Feldman. Mindy's the author of Fix What You Can. Miriam Feldman, the author of He Came In With It. I am the author of Ben Behind His Voices. And we're at various stages of recovery, and some days more hopeful than others. However, as we record tonight, which is in August 2025, President Trump has issued an executive order on homelessness that I would just like to kind of discuss a bit. And then our topic tonight is something many of you have written to us about, which is, hey, you talk a lot about psychosis. You have a lot of guests on who are like schizophrenia superstars who are getting their masters and have been sober 19 years and good for them. And you also talk about people who are homeless, but what about the people in the middle? What about the people who are like, all right, our loved one's doing okay. I don't know if we're ever going to get him or her back the way they were before. I don't know if they're ever going to get their master's degree. I don't even know if they can get a job above minimum wage. I don't even know if they can get a job, but they're not psychotic and they're with us and we'll take it. It's where the ordinary becomes miraculous. So a lot of the reason for that is what we've come to know are negative symptoms. So tonight we're going to be talking about our situations and negative symptoms and recovery in the middle. But first, 2 orders of business. Mindy, many of you know, if you've been listening, that we talk a lot about Dr. Laitman, who is a doctor but not a psychiatrist, and we want to issue a sort of a clarification. Mindy?
So I'm the one who's been calling him a psychiatrist. And so he kind of called me on it. And what he wants to be called, because he is not a psychiatrist, is an internist specializing in psychotic disorders. He's proud of, being an internist and all the effort he had to go through for that. And but he also is proud of that he's treating psychotic disorders. So that's what he wants to be called and what he should be called. And if I ever call him a psychiatrist again, I hope the 2 of you will correct me immediately and slap me up the side of the head.
Done.
Okay.
Happy to slap you. But speaking of Dr. Laitman, the internist, every year, and we're aware not everybody can be treated by Dr. Laitman, but many listeners have said that learning about his method of effectiveness of the proper way to administer clozapine has helped them, even if he isn't their doctor. Go back and check out the episodes we have with him in it, including the Doromind episode recently. But he put a book out, so you can read the book. You can have your psychiatrist read the book. But every year he does have a a barbecue for some of his patients and their families. And Mindy and I met there briefly one year. Mimi and I met there briefly one year. My son has never been a patient, to be clear. But Mimi, you went this year with Nick. And can you just briefly share how different this time was in terms of recovery with Nick from a while back?
Yeah, in terms of our own personal experience, it really was quite different. The other time I went with Nick had to be 3 or even 4 years, 3 years ago. And then the next time after that, he had that terrible pneumonia and we couldn't go. And he's like a different person now. I mean, he was so much more engaged and so much just there in the world with us, talking to the people who were there. And it's very nice. It's really nice to go and to be with other people. I made a post in my Facebook about it, and I just showed some pictures and things, and I wrote, I was in New York at Dr. Laitman's. It's a club none of us wanted to belong to, but we're all so grateful for. And that's the thing. And I realize that most people don't have or a lot of people don't have the means to travel across the country. And also, Dr. Laitman can only take so many patients. But I just would put out there the word to everybody to just, we can do it ourselves too. We can create groups in our neighborhoods, in our areas of other mothers dealing with the same thing. And the other thing that I wrote on the post was, it is so amazing to just be with a group of people where I don't have to explain a damn thing.
Mm,
Everybody gets it, and we can just talk, and there's no equivocation, and it bolsters your spirit and it makes you feel not so alone. And it's something that's in reach of everybody. Because I guarantee you, throw a rock in your own neighborhood, you'll hit somebody who's got a mental health issue. And so I'm just not saying everybody should come to New York to Dr. Laitman's, but we should all work on creating this for ourselves, because it is
I
very
love that.
um, encouraging and helpful.
Great. Thank you.
Someday we'll all three be there, maybe next year.
That's great.
In the same room one year. I mean, and shout out to the other time that Mimi and I were in the same place for a few days actually was the Johns Hopkins Schizophrenia Symposium, I think it is. And
Yeah.
I'm still a huge fan. I can't make it this year. And so, but I believe it's happening soon. And that's another in the Baltimore area, another fabulous event to learn and gather with people. There's comfort in knowing other families are going through what you're going through, even at various stages of recovery. So there's that. Now, also recently, President Trump did issue this executive order. And by the way, we have done shows on assisted outpatient treatment. We have done shows with Brian Stetton, who is or was at the time mental health advisor to the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, about a similar initiative to get the homeless off the streets, even though they say they don't need to be helped. And we did a follow up about the success of that program. There are some states that handle it differently, but President Trump issued an executive order called Ending Crime and Disorder on American Streets. And basically, what it does is it directs federal agencies to make it easier to involuntarily treat people with serious mental illnesses, part of a bid to address homelessness. Sounds like a good idea. It sounds in a way like what some of us have been hoping for. Like, no, don't let my son live on the street. I mean, my son has been homeless a couple of times, and I'm told it's not against the law. There's nothing we can do. We can't force him into help. I live in Connecticut, and our governor is pushing back and says, no, we don't need this. What we need is affordable housing. And I generally agree with my governor, but on this, I have to say I'm in the affordable housing alone isn't enough, because if you're a listener of the podcast, you know that my son did get into affordable housing and he wasn't equipped to handle it. And so he wound up homeless again with someone else taking over his apartment. I mean, affordable housing is certainly important. Housing first is certainly important, but it isn't the only answer. neither is gathering people up and criminalizing homelessness. So I don't know. So Mindy, you're the one of the three of us with legislative experience. Granted, it's in one state, but do you have thoughts on this order?
Oh, you betcha.
Oh, she used to
I
Minnesota.
tried.
You betcha. Okay.
So I always think to get what we need in the mental health system, we need conservatives and liberals. And if you have only one or the other, then you're not going to have the continuum of care that people like our sons and our listeners, children and family members, or even themselves need. So people like Bethany Yiser, who's the head of Cures Foundation. We've had her here as a guest. She's testifying that this is a good thing, that she never would have gotten help if she hadn't been civilly committed. Eric
Smith.
Smith has been on here and he said the same thing. All of our allies and friends, I think, would agree that if a person has anosognosia and they're not recognizing their illness because of their brain illness, someone needs to step in if they're really, really sick and not caring for themselves, not just if they're dangerous to selves or others. But we never want to criminalize them, like you said, Randye. And then the other piece, though, and it's what the liberals are more apt to do, and what President Trump is actually not doing big time, and that is to have a mental health system once you have civilly committed someone. Civil commitments happen at each state level. Every state has a different law. Some people have advocated that it would be good to have a consistent national law. But no matter what kind of law you have, if you don't have a mental health system, it's not going to do any good. You can train the police all you want to, but if they take people, they know what to recognize, they do recognize it, and they take them to the hospital, but they're not admitted. It doesn't do any good to train the police. If you civilly commit someone and you have no place to send them for critical care, there's a lot of halfway house, intensive residential treatment services, IRTS's, places across the country, the temporary 90-day programs. But if someone's really psychotic and new to the illness or really spiraled down, 90 days isn't enough. So if you don't have all kinds of things in the mental health system to address all kinds of needs, then you haven't got anything when they're civilly committed. So I applaud those who are looking at the problem of homelessness and people that don't recognize their illness. But President Trump and company are not only not adding to the mental health system to accommodate for that many more people, they're actually cutting things, so this is like definitely not going to work. I don't know how you can civilly commit a lot of people and then
There's no place to put them.
there's no place to put
Because
them.
with this particular government that we've got right now, I wouldn't be surprised to see them sent to a prison in El Salvador, which is obviously that's tongue in cheek, but this is that same mindset of get them off the streets and out of our view because we don't want to look at this mess. But it's not, let's help these poor people with an illness. And I guarantee you that's what this White House is talking about. Just get them out of our way so we don't have to see them. And they throw them back. And, we fight so hard. Jails are not treatment centers. I'm afraid this is going to just direct the flow back in that direction.
Yeah.
And having him use the language of safety for others, and he uses the criminal type language in his dog whistle way. So that is very concerning. And we do know when you don't have a mental health system, where do they end up? On the street and in the jails and prisons. That is where they go. I don't know. Hopefully they won't get to Alcatraz in Florida or something, but if they're immigrants and they have a mental illness, sure, they could get there. So I think it's a scary time, but we have to keep advocating for everything. I'm just going to tell this one story. I heard from a mother who lives in Nebraska this week, and her daughter is in West Virginia, and in West Virginia, they have such a lack of beds. Her daughter, a good citizen, called 911 and had the police come out. They took her to the hospital and she was so sick. She's drug addicted. She's been on the street for 3 years. No one will be able to make her do anything. She doesn't think she's sick. The hospital admitted her. She was so sick, even in West Virginia. And her mother celebrated. She called me because we kept in touch over this situation. And then the next call the mother got was from the hospital social worker wanting to work on the discharge plan. And the mother had not yet talked to anyone at the hospital. Her daughter had gotten no treatment. This is like the 72-hour hold. 3 days later, they're discharging her because they have nowhere to go. She should be civilly committed. If President Trump's law was in effect, she surely would be. But there in West Virginia, they have no place for her to go.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I think we all share the same perspective. And also, to be fair, our Governor Lamont, I agree that affordable housing is a huge issue. And not everyone homeless is mentally ill. There are battered wives, and there are people who are on the street for a reason other than mental illness. And for them, the solution is affordable housing. So housing first is important, but housing alone won't do it either. So if you're listening, governors and President of the United States, this is what these three moms think. So thank you for that perspective. I mean, you're right, Mimi. Like they just want to get them out of sight, but they have no plan.
I mean, I hear that dog whistle. The minute they say something about making the streets safe, that's all it's about, is more cultivating of fear, cultivating fear of people with mental illness, and it also reinforces this idea that somehow mentally ill people are going to hurt you, which we all know the statistics doesn't support that scenario. But and everybody's living in fear of our kids who just need some medical treatment, and it's tragic.
And constant medical treatment, which is where the issue is. It's not like, oh, put them in the hospital for 72 hours and they'll be cured. It's, as we know, we've addressed this issue before. So, which brings us to kind of the overarching topic tonight, which is recovery in the middle, not necessarily a superstar, not necessarily homeless on the street, psychotic, but people like our sons who have experienced in recovery use in the same way the addiction community uses it. In recover doesn't mean you've recovered. It means you're in the process. You're in a process. And so I think one of the most truly heartbreaking things I learned, and truly relatable things I learned when I first started, and I learned it at a NAMI family to family class. We have an episode on that in our first season. If you don't know what that is, education is hugely empowering. But when I got to class 2 or 3 or whatever it is, when they said, oh, schizophrenia isn't just hallucinations or things added to your personality, it's also negative symptoms, things that were taken away from you. And I started crying because I'm like, oh my God, this is why I miss my son. He is not just my son with an added feature of having psychosis. So these are just some of the 8 principal negative symptoms according to various sources. And there is this concept also called frozen in time, when their brains start to change, whatever age that is. Often that's their maturity level. Like my son, I think maturity-wise got to 14 or 15.
Mine too, I think.
Right? And so emotionally, there's still that, Mom, you can't tell me what to do. Mom, help me. Like it's that, what's that teenage book? I hate you. Now can you drive me to the mall? Whatever that book is like. So it's constantly in that frame of mind. Some of the things I miss in my son, even when he is stable on his meds. We had a 9-year period where he was really stable and working full time. And people would say, oh, he's back to normal. I said, he's 65%. that I will take 65%. Because he's had a lot of psychosis, and so that damages his brain. But all right, so here's some of the negative symptoms, and let's just chat about them in your sons too. So apathy is one. The person may have a lack of interest in activities that were important to them previously, such as their work or studies. Blunted emotional responses or absent emotional responses. Social withdrawal. The inability to create a productive day and follow through with it. Impaired attention, which is like difficulty in concentrating during conversation or concentrate on tasks. Anhedonia, which is a fancy word that says an inability to experience pleasure. They feel gray or empty. And there's sexual problems as a negative symptom, and lethargy, being tired. Some of these are side effects of medication, but very often they are felt as side effects when really they're just effects of the illness. So I'm going to ask you guys to talk about your sons, where they are right now, and where do negative symptoms come into play? Because both of your sons are on Clozaril. My son is on an every 4-week injection of Haldol. His period of success was on Clozaril, but he won't take it because it makes him too tired. So that's where we are right now. We all know tomorrow's tomorrow, today's today. But can you guys talk about the negative symptoms and how it plays into their recovery?
Yeah, one thing that came to mind right away as we started talking about this sort of the people in the middle who are not in active psychosis and not medicated into a stupor, but not really functioning. It's very interesting because my middle daughter and her husband just came to visit for a week, and their take on Nick was, wow, he's doing so great. We haven't, and her husband has never seen him this good. But then the next thing was, Mom, he needs to get a job. You need to make him get a job. And it opens up this whole can of worms. And I was thinking about this phenomenon, because with Nick, what happens with me is there's this precipice, there's this threshold where he gets better and better, and that's really great. And then he's right on the threshold. But the thing is, the way the whole system is set up and the way it just is by nature, I find myself hesitant to push him over that line, because once you get enough better, you lose all your support. And I'm always afraid that, he's going to get a job and then he'll lose his coverage, and then he won't have all the stuff that he has with that. And also, I have a lot of control over him because he's dependent on me. So he doesn't get in trouble. He's not getting drugs. He's not doing things because I control him. I control his money. I control everything. And so then there's that fear of, well, if he gets better, he's like up to 65%, say. And then there's this danger red area between, say, 65 and 85%, where God knows what they're going to do before they're well enough to really manage their life. And so I find myself, I mean, I hate to admit it, but I'm very honest on this podcast, so I'll say it. I find myself like holding back a little. Like, I don't even want to go into that world, because at least now he's safe. And so that's a very hard thing to deal with, because I do want him better and I do want him to start doing these things. And on the other hand, I'm hesitant.
I appreciate your honesty. And for me, the negative symptoms are the saddest. I relate so much, Randye, when you said you broke into tears when you learned about negative symptoms at Family to Family. And there's a reason those Kleenex boxes are sitting on every table at those classes that you now teach. I always thought I would have a hard time teaching them, because then I'd have to be the one not crying but anyway.
No, you can cry if you're the leader. Trust me. It's
Oh,
fine.
you can. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's good to know. But Jim, when he's psychotic, I'm in the mama bear mode. I'm energized. My adrenaline goes up. I, rush to see what can be done. I often am mad at him, for how he's treating me and that sort of thing. But he hasn't been that way actually for 5 years. So I have not had that actually since I wrote my book. I finished that, and somehow that helped. But it's the negative symptoms that I think are so sad, because then he's not out of his mind. He's in his right mind, and he can recognize what he's lost too. It's not just me. He sits back and he's in the living room when the relatives are here for special occasions, and no one's talking to him. And if they try to talk to him, he will answer, as we know, because that's one of the symptoms of negative symptoms, is he'll answer in very sparse language. And then the person doesn't know where to go with that. So, okay, they ask them a question and back to, the other conversation that's more exciting for other young people, and including his sister. Your daughters are so good, Mimi, about working with Nick. And Angela tries, but they just don't have the same personalities at all. So it's very sad. And then when I really saw it in spades, so I can relate what you're saying, Mimi, when you got control and things are going pretty well. As you know, Jim moved to supportive housing this spring, and he had such negative symptoms when he got there because they are kind of using the person-centered care. So they lay out the options, and then it's up to him, a person with negative symptoms. He is on clozapine that's supposed to do the best job with negative symptoms. And now the new drug, Cobenfy, is the next best for negative symptoms. But even so, he doesn't have any initiative for the options presented. And they don't even have food there now. Every client is supposed to go grocery shopping with somebody and then take care of their own food. And if the person
With
says,
just somebody they
well,
find.
one of the mental health workers, and they're very good about taking people, but they have to ask. They have to ask, and they have to initiate, they have to put it on the calendar or let somebody know. So Jim, didn't get grocery shopping. He didn't do anything. And we were out of town 2 of his first 3 weeks there. He ended up, because of his negative symptoms, in the hospital because he didn't eat. When we had his 45-day meeting, Jim and I were at it with all the staff that he has at his supportive housing. Jim kind of sheepishly said, as they were saying, we found out we need to pay better attention to you and give you more prompts. Jim said, kind of sheepishly, well, you really shouldn't have to tell a grown man to eat. But they learned they did, I mean, and I just find that so sad. And he just came over tonight. He's been at his place the last 3 or 4 days. And I asked, what did he do? Nothing. He sat in his apartment the whole time. There are things on the elevator, activities. They could have gone to cabaret. Somebody gave tickets for a busload or however many went. He doesn't do any of those things because he has the lack of initiative. So I find that so very sad and isolating and lonely. And it makes me sad. His negative symptoms make me sad.
And they're impossible to explain to people because people look at that and, well, why doesn't he do this? Well, I don't understand. I mean, even my own husband, Nick's own father, will say to me, sometimes I think he's just lazy, that's why. And it's like, it's this invisible condition, that is always suspect. There's always some shadow of, well, if you wanted it hard enough, you could do it. You know what I mean? This bootstrap sort of thing. And it's like, and I was very much rub some dirt on it and walk it off kind of a mom with my kids when they were little. But now I've met my match. It's like you can't rub enough dirt on this to make it go away. It has nothing to do with bootstraps, and it's very, very hard to contend with.
Yes, we haven't had a discussion like this among us for a while, and I so appreciate hearing this. I mean, my son, all of us, when our sons were younger, were popular, smart, friends, great promise. We're so lucky. They're I know as my son was getting ill that this anhedonia, the, inability to experience pleasure, like he became withdrawn, or he would write a poem instead of talking to his friends. This kid who used to get a million phone calls a day, and just, and he would go through this period where school is the problem, and he would drop out of, he would get a job after school, and 2 days, loved it. Like, great. Like, he would work at the record store and he'd get the salesman of the month. And then after that, it's like, they tell me I have to come in early. Why do I have to come in early? I don't have, it would be like great start, crash, great start, crash. And it's almost like he wanted to continue to be enthusiastic about things, but he couldn't. And the year before he was hospitalized the first time, he got and lost 7 jobs with the same pattern of, they finally appreciate me in all my gloriousness. What do you mean I have to bust a table? So then again, when I learned about the illness, grandiose delusions, all kinds of things, and who knows that the voices he says he doesn't hear, what they were saying to him about who he is. But I do feel like, we always say that treatment, structure, community, and purpose are the things we all need, and they do help with schizophrenia. But when he was at 65%, it is having a job that helped him. You know, he loved being a waiter. And he like used up his charm at work because he would like bring colored pens for the kids to color with while he was taking the order. Like, there were pieces of him as a little, like the little kid that used to be everybody's favorite babysitter, came back a little bit in this 9-year period. And he went to college, and he enthusiastically took the classes that he felt like taking where he could talk a blue streak, like sociology or whatever. But I don't know now if his lack of enthusiasm for life is fear or being on a different med, or he's been beaten down by all the loss. When COVID came,
All in all, it's just so sad to watch.
right.
I
And
mean,
that leads him to go, I know how to feel better. I'll smoke some pot. And then that leads to another set of problems. Like, he really was sober for a long time. And I think when he got a job in a department store and they little by little demoted him from the floor to the stockroom to unloading trucks, but he still showed up. And when they finally stopped giving him hours, I think it broke him.
Yeah.
It's just like, I'm not going to go. And now he won't go for a job unless it's a waiter again. And now he has practically no teeth. And like, so anyway, but going back to the negative symptoms, that's what I see now. It's like it's best when he's sober and he's at that sweet spot with his injection.
mhm.
There is hope for him. I mean, if this is the med he's on, this is the med he's on, we'll live with it. There are moments when I see my son in there, like when he's playing with his nieces and nephew. But
Mhm.
I, when he got into his own apartment, just like you, Mindy, there were options for care. There was a weekly bus trip to Stop and Shop. It's our supermarket in Connecticut. There was a weekly social group, but he doesn't see himself as part of that community. And there was no given structure. And as much as he says he hates it, so this kind of like, I think it led him back out into the streets to try to make friends. And we all know what's on the streets. Right now, I don't think I've shared this on the podcast, but he missed a couple of court dates because of his illness and his usage, and finally caught up to him. So he's back in jail. Wait,
That is so, so sad.
it is sad. And it's also, here I am going, well, he's safe. Well, he's pretty,
I know that's the thing about
you
jail.
know,
If there isn't any other, just like we were talking about with the mental health system at the beginning, if there isn't any other safe place, then all of a sudden to families like us, jail doesn't look so bad.
right. And it's
And
not
that's quite a
prison. Yeah.
condemnation of our mental health system.
It is. And he's not in prison. He hasn't been convicted of anything. It's a holding place with 54 guys. And he knows the ropes now. He knows to get commissary money, and he knows how to make a taco out of Doritos, and he But he wanted to be bonded out, but he won't show up for the court dates if he isn't. So it's almost like, and he's getting his meds, and it's okay. But when he gets out, and he was doing very well in a sober home, but again, other than going to 5 meetings a week, he had nothing to do.
When you have nothing to do, then the negative symptoms
Or worse.
come out in spades. And then it's just kind of a cycle. You mentioned one thing they can do then is go back to drugs. At this place where Jim is, which I think is a wonderful place. I think it's going to work out, maybe in the next year or so, but we're still working on it now. But Jim, in his desperation not to be lonely, started smoking again. And he hasn't smoked for 3 years. And
we're talking cigarettes here, right?
And I'm talking cigarettes, and you could say, well, you should be lucky using cigarettes. But for Jim, cigarettes are a gateway back to using weed constantly. And then that's a gateway back to using crack constantly. I mean, we have been through this progression. So I was terrified when he got back to cigarettes, but he smoked for 3 weeks. Now he's in a terrible fight to not continue smoking, but he hasn't smoked for another 3 weeks. So he's trying really hard, but that was a tactic he was willing to go to meet some people at the place he's at, to sit on the smoking porch with the smokers. And people there ask him to do things. It's not totally just him reading things in the elevator, but he says no, he needs to be asked more and constantly. I mean, you can't just take a no from someone that's suffering from negative symptoms and call it a day. Check it off. I asked them and they said no, or have your own feelings hurt because they said no. So yeah, I don't know where it's going to end, but Jim actually has had the suicidal ideation. I think I mentioned that before, and that's because of this lack of enough to do and no community, and he's lonesome.
Yeah. And I wonder, since we are in the, talking about the apathy of the negative symptoms, many of us, like, I'm not retired, but I know people who are, and they find pleasure in volunteer work. So those of us who do not have a mental illness and we have money in the bank, and, or we're old enough to have social, like, we can work for nothing and feel purpose in that. But for someone like my son, it's like, work for nothing. Why would I work for nothing? And yet he's at his happiest when he can help somebody. Like, he's in the sober home, and if he puts in the time, if a new guy comes into the home, I can see him trying to help that guy and feeling like this is a reason to get out of bed. So, so I think we've given a good reality check of what recovery in the middle looks like. And, as a mom, just like going, I'll take it. I'll take 65%. I mean, I wish for more. I hope for more. I would love for my son to have more. He used to have more. Why doesn't he have more? Even like, he's got 6 credits to get his associate's degree. It's just like, why? But I'm just reading this book, The Let Them Theory. It's Mel Robbins. And I didn't want to read it because it's like, oh, I know all this.
Well, I can only assume that doesn't apply to us.
Well, you know what? I think all of these things apply a little bit because, we know it better than anyone. You can't control someone else. You can only control yourself, blah, 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 blah. And it's true, but it bears repeating. If I could control my son's life, I would. And sometimes we have to, as you know. But there's that fine line. But and my son is clearly an addict now, and in the Al-Anon program, it's the same sort of sentiment. But, she talks a lot about, it's just like, this is the point. I knew there was a point here, that we can't.
I'm glad that happens to you.
Yeah.
It always is me.
Oh God, because I'm a blabbermouth. We cannot. She's talking about, and by the way, the author of that book is Mel Robbins. She's fabulous. I'm enjoying this book way more than I thought I would. And she's using the example of a wife wanting her husband to get in shape. Okay. And so and this comes to our listeners who are like, how do I get them to take their medication? Well, you can't. You can require it. You can set a rule. You can set a boundary. You can bribe them. We've done any of those things. I decided a long time ago, it's not my job to convince my son he has schizophrenia because I can't. But she says, you can't change someone else. And she gets through that whole chapter. But the next chapter is, but you can influence them. And here's how you influence them. And one of the things she talks about that I think can apply to us as a tactic a little bit is the language she's using is you apologize and say, I realize I've been hounding you to get well, to get in shape and everything. And I've never really asked you how you feel about it. How do you feel about it? And I went, that I can use with my son.
Mhm.
Like I could say, I apologize for, hounding you about getting a job or thinking that should be your next step. And I realize I've been doing that. And so I never stopped to ask you, how do you feel about getting a job? What are your feelings?
Sounds like Dr. Amador a bit. He
Yeah,
talks
it's
about
very similar, to the
apologizing
leap
and
theory and everything. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this, but so what are the things, if someone's listening and they're feeling completely hopeless now, other than just accepting things as they are, which is a tactic, are there thoughts on not pushing, just getting to another level, just improving things a little bit when people have loved ones like ours that are in the middle doing okay? Any thoughts of advice, if you will, for people?
well, one thing which Dr. Laitman helped Jim and me both to do with him was for Jim, who's doesn't have any initiative ability, we developed a calendar, a weekly calendar, and it's got, Monday through Friday and when he should be where at each time of the day. He should be at work Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoon. Jim does have a job and he's lucky that it's at NAMI, Minnesota, National Alliance on Mental Illness. So they understand if he doesn't show up, and they don't, he'll never be fired. And, but on the other hand, I think they're in some ways too nice to him, because then he's like, well, whether I go or not, it doesn't matter. They don't care. But on the other hand, it's got, going for, 12 to 15 hours a week, or 12 anyway, for 3 to 4 hours, 3 times a week. And it's got when he should go grocery shopping. We're trying to get him interested in the Clubhouse International. And there, the peers will help with the negative symptoms. They know that if someone doesn't say they want to do something the first time, they know how to ask them 10 times or 20 times. That is the very best thing, are the peers who have been there themselves, and they know the person wants to, but they just keep saying no. So, and I know if Jim's going to get rooted in a Clubhouse, he needs to go to learn about it with someone besides me. So Jim's worker, he's got a worker that's not connected with his supportive housing. Actually, she's called a behavioral home health specialist, but she helps him with all his paperwork. And she has taken him to the Clubhouse, and she filled out all the paper with him at a separate meeting. And now she's trying to convince him to go to turn it in. He hasn't done that yet. But he was given a nice welcome when he went by the peers. And so Dr. Laitman and I hope he will someday, get involved in that, because that's a huge answer. And then the staff at the supportive housing is supposed to be trying with their busy schedules to what they call prompt him to do these things. But their prompting is, I don't know about other states, but Minnesota is a big person-centered care state. And they're just, staff is kind of scolded by our Department of Human Services if they don't go with what the person wants. And so they're kind of acculturated to not insist that the person do anything. And that doesn't work well for people with negative symptoms. So the last thing I'll say is, so Jim, with this big push from me and his doctor and actually the staff there trying to get him to work, he went to work a couple of weeks ago. And NAMI right now is out of work for him because they don't do classes and seminars in August to speak of. So there's this gap, and that's what he does, is put all those things in the computer. And so he has to wait till September. So we went all dressed up. He had new clothes. He was excited to work. He was ready to follow this schedule, and they had no work for him. So there's always something.
Yeah.
There's always
Oh my
something.
God. Thank you. Those are great tips. Mimi, anything, any final words?
No, I mean, again, I think it's like we sort of learn in life, and especially as women, repetitively asking for something is a no-no, because, not only all this thing of pushing people and annoying people, but then we have this internalized thing of, oh, well, I don't want to be a nag. Um, I don't want to be annoying. And like, yeah, you got to just let go of all of that, because I've got to tell you, there have been so many times that on the fourth or fifth go round, he goes for something. Even if it's just like, let's go on this trip. Well, I don't feel I don't fall for that anymore. You know what I mean? And then I say to him afterwards, see, it was great, wasn't it? Yes, I had a great time. Well, why do you think you always say no to everything initially? And now he'll say, he's got the insight where he'll say, I think I have anxiety. I think I get jitters. And so now I can say to him, well, Nick, remember what you said about the anxiety? That's what this is. It's not real. If we get up and we go, but I have to really kind of hold his hand through that kind of stuff to get him. But then I mean, it is improving, but I think just not be afraid. I mean, like my big, rallying cry is always just all bets are off. Do what you need to do to get the result that you need, because it's the result, him showing up and going and doing something, that creates the improvement, not some intangible thing inside or in the air. It's like, if he finally goes and he has a memory in his head of, oh, I went, I did this, and it was fine.
Yeah.
Jim also will sometimes do things because he knows it will make me happy, and then he ends up enjoying it. So I'm willing to use that. I'm like, I'm really unhappy that you're smoking again. I'm really unhappy. So he doesn't want to make me unhappy. And then if he does want to if I do want him to do something, he knows it will make me happy. And he expresses that. I know you would be really mad if, or I know it would make you really happy. And then that's a motivating thing for him. I don't know if is that the case with you guys too?
Sometimes. Sometimes if my son doesn't feel emasculated by wanting, it depends on where he is in his recovery. That he was
Yeah.
such a loving young man. And when he's at his best and at that sweet spot, he still is. Oh, I forgot. First thing when he got out of jail is he wanted to get his sister a birthday present because he missed her birthday. First thought.
Oh,
See, that's
oh,
who he is. That's who he is.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
it's just, but the illness gets in the way of who he is. So I would say that for if anyone's listening who has schizophrenia, seek out your peers and find a community if you can, and take it one step at a time and get your love and support where you can. If you're like us, someone with a loved one with schizophrenia, I would say the first thing is, and I think the point of this podcast is, keep expectations, keep hope, but keep expectations realistic.
Yeah.
I hope my son takes 6 more college credits and gets that feeling of getting an associate's degree. I don't expect it. Not that I don't want to make it sound like I have no faith in him, but I mean, it's not an expectation that I'm going to like, oh, if he doesn't do that, everything sucks. Like, it's just, I do hope that for him. I hope that he stays sober. I hope, and I think he can, but I also recognize it's his life. I'm using everything in the book. When he goes to court, one of the victims is me, and they asked me, do you feel safe? And I said, well, I feel safe when he's in treatment and sober, completely safe.
Mhm.
When he's not in treatment,
That's a great answer.
and he's not sober, he's never laid a hand on me. He's never pulled a knife on me. I don't know what the voices would tell him to do. We've all come close to those experiences, or many of our listeners have, from the letters that we get. They said, what would you like for a favorable disposition, or whatever the legal term is? I said, what I would like would be for him to be required to stay on medication and to check in and check in urine tests weekly. That's what would make me feel safe. That's what
Mhm.
I would like. Required treatment and required sobriety.
Well, and
Yes.
again, we come back to that same issue, which is the issue that I urge our listeners to talk about and advocate for. It's one thing to say, let's clean up these streets and get all these disgusting people out of our vision, but they're, first of all, not disgusting people. They're people who are ill. And
Right.
second of all, until there's treatment, until there are beds, until there are places for these people to go, it's just going to be a matter of rearranging the mess over and over and over again. We need
Right.
treatment centers.
Yep. We
You
need
could require people to take their meds, but if there is no follow-up, even to do a UA, that costs money. If you're cutting the system, how are they going to get the blood or the urine test to
Right.
prove that they're not using? And who's going to do that? You have to have follow-up for edicts.
Yep. And we have a lot of, if you want to go back on our episodes, we have some in our first episode with Lynn Nanos and other people like that. We talk about what's needed in the symptom. Many of our guests have spoken about that. So there's a lot more out there. Regarding negative symptoms and recovery in the middle, I encourage people to learn everything they can. Take a NAMI family to family class if you can. Many are available online, or read the books, Surviving Schizophrenia, read as much as you can. The more you know, the more you'll be able to keep expectations realistic, but never give up hope. I never give up hope. But things are the way they are today. And recovery in the middle is better than no recovery at all. That's my final word.
I have given up on Jim graduating. He's also just a few credits short, but he's told me, well, I work at NAMI. They don't require a college degree for what I'm doing. So I'm not going to do that. I've had my college experience and I've been there, done that. So don't get your hopes up.
Yeah.
So that is one thing I have given up on. So if he ever surprises me, that'd be great, but I'm not counting on him.
It's not, you adjust your expectations. So
Yep.
anyway, we're 3 moms, 3 sons that are recovering in the middle, and even that is still a good thing. It's not exactly what we wished when we pushed them out of our bodies. It wasn't the hope we had. But, as I said, if my son can get back to 65% again, it'd be fine with me. It'd be, we always hope for more. I hope it's fine for him. And I think more peer support for those with schizophrenia can help. And don't measure yourself against the superstars. That may not be your form of recovery, but there's all kinds of recovery. And know that there is hope. We need more research. We need better systems. And we need families to speak up and share about this podcast, please, so that others can benefit. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Schizophrenia, 3 Moms in the Trenches. You can help out the podcast and help others by sharing the podcast and by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts and or on YouTube. And remember, you can reach us at mindygreiling.com, randyk.com, or miriam-feldman.com.